The chipped ceramic warmed the backs of his hands. Black coffee, strong enough to strip paint, was a morning ritual. Not for the taste, not anymore. Just routine was good. Routine meant everything was predictable, and predictable meant safe. From his perch in the maintenance shed overlooking the base of Shale Ridge's Falcon Run, Monk watched the first skiers of the day carve hesitant tracks into the virgin snow. Shale Ridge wasn't the Rockies or even the Tetons. It was a relatively small resort nestled in the Bitterroots, catering to a wealthier, more discerning clientele, which suited Monk just fine. Less chaos, less attention. He'd consciously chosen it that way after everything. He wasn't officially a maintenance man, not exactly. The resort called him a facilities assistant, a deliberately vague title that allowed him to exist on the periphery. Mostly, he checked lift cables, tightened bolts, swept snow off walkways, jobs that required minimal human interaction. He preferred it that way. People asked questions. Questions led to remembering. And remembering was a cold, jagged thing he actively avoided. The radio crackled. A cheerful voice announcing the opening of the Silver Queen chairlift. Monk ignored it. He focused on the methodical rhythm of his hands around the mug, the steam rising in a ghostly plume. The call came in over the radio, shattering the fragile peace. A clipped, professional tone that couldn't quite mask the underlying urgency. "We've got a downslope incident on Falcon. Possible fatality. Requesting ski patrol and sheriff's department." Monk didn't move. He knew the run. Falcon was a black diamond, steep and unforgiving. Accidents happened. Always did. He took another sip of coffee, its bitterness doing little to thaw the chill that had settled in his bones. A few minutes, that is all it took. The swarm of red jackets descended, a splash of color against the blinding white. He watched detached as they worked, the methodical movements. The practiced efficiency, it was almost familiar. A phantom ache resonated in his left shoulder, a ghost of a memory. He told himself to look away, to focus on the chipped paint on the shed wall, to catalog the spare parts. But he couldn't. He needed to know. It was just another accident, another statistic. He grabbed his worn parka, the canvas stiff and smelling faintly of oil and disuse. He didn't need to be asked. He just went. He told himself it was about ensuring the snowcats wouldn't disturb the scene. A plausible excuse even to himself. The scene was colder up close. The pristine snow, already marred by deep gouges and dark stains. The air, thick with the metallic tang of blood. The victim, a young man sprawled unnaturally at the base of a stand of pines. Expensive gear, impeccably maintained skis, athletic build, early 20s, Monk guessed. Ski patrol was already there, administering what little could be done. He recognized Ben, a young, eager patrolman he'd exchanged a few polite nods with over the past month. Ben looked shaken. "Rough one," Monk said, his voice raspy from disuse. Ben jumped, startled. "Mr. Holt. Harding, didn't see you." He swallowed hard. "Yeah, bad break. Hit a tree, looked like." Monk knelt beside the body, ignoring Ben's questioning look. He wasn't interested in the platitudes. He was a mechanic, a problem solver. He saw patterns, discrepancies. He saw things others missed. The bindings, that is what caught his eye first. They were released cleanly, efficiently, almost too cleanly. A recreational skier, even a good one, rarely came free that perfectly on impact. Usually something broke, skis, boots, bones. There was a raggedness to real accidents. This was surgical. He ran a gloved hand over the surrounding snow, flawless, untracked. An impossible ribbon of perfection in a landscape sculpted by chaos. It was as if the area had been meticulously cleared. "Ski patrol did what they could, right?" Monk asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yay, of course. We secured the scene, did CPR, nothing." Ben looked genuinely distressed. "Sheriff Raylan's on his way." Monk's gaze traced the line of the fall. It didn't make sense. The trajectory. The angle of impact, it suggested a deliberate course correction. A last-second maneuver, not the panicked flail of someone losing control. He pushed himself to his feet, the cold seeping into his knees. The mountain air, usually bracing, felt suffocating. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. A flash. A searing white light behind his eyelids, the crunch of snow under his boots, the desperate screams I Lina. He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting the memory. The weight of a small body in his arms, the icy grip of fear, the futility of it all. He'd been ski patrol for 10 years. 10 years of rescues, of guiding lost skiers, of patching up scraped knees and broken wrists. He'd prided himself on his instincts, his calm under pressure, until Lena, a blizzard, had rolled in sudden and violent. A young girl separated from her father. He'd found her, buried in a drift, hypothermic and barely conscious. He'd gotten her on the radio, called for backup, started warming her. They were so close, just minutes away from the rescue team. Then the avalanche hit, a wall of white fury that swallowed everything. He'd shielded Lena with his body, praying they'd be found. They were. But Lena hadn't made it. He'd blamed himself for years, should have called it in sooner, should have taken a different route, should have... The memory receded, leaving him trembling and nauseous. He hadn't felt this raw, this vulnerable. In months, he'd built walls around that pain, layers of indifference and routine. And this felt like someone had deliberately tried to tear them down. Sheriff Raylan arrived, a bulky figure in a windbreaker, his face already set in a grim expression. He surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, offering a curt nod to Ben. Another one? He sighed. College kid from Denver, visiting friends. Monk stepped forward, hesitant. He knew Raylan, a local man pragmatic and dismissive of anything that smacked of conspiracy. Sheriff, I was just observing. The bindings seem to have released unusually cleanly, and the snow around here looks prepared. Raylan gave him a skeptical look. Prepared, Harding, it snowed all night. What do you expect, a dance floor? It doesn't look like a typical fall. The trajectory, the way the bindings released. Monk trailed off, realizing how ridiculous he sounded. Raylan's expression hardened. Look, I appreciate your civic duty, but I've been doing this for 20 years. It is a tragic accident. The kid lost control, hit a tree. End of story. He turned to Ben. Get a team to start securing his gear. We need to get this body down to the morgue. But Sheriff, Monk began, but Raylan cut him off. No buts, Harding. You go back to your shed and let the professionals handle this. Monk retreated defeated. He knew arguing would be pointless. Raylan wouldn't listen. He never did. He watched as the body was loaded onto the sled, the red jackets disappearing into the trees. He lingered, unable to shake the feeling that something vital had been overlooked. He walked a wider perimeter, scanning the snow, searching for what he didn't even know. A missing piece of the puzzle, a sign. And then he saw it. A small, bright flash of orange nestled amongst the white. A tiny, triangular piece of plastic. He crouched down, carefully brushing away the snow. It was a fragment of a ski brake. A high-end brake, the kind found on racing skis. But these weren't racing skis, they were recreational skis. And this particular brake wasn't just high-end. It was sooty rare, an aftermarket component manufactured by a small Austrian company known for its precision engineering and exorbitant price tag. He carefully placed the fragment in a small evidence bag he carried. A relic from his patrol days, his fingers trembling. He hadn't intended to get involved. He had sworn he wouldn't. But the orange plastic felt cold and significant in his hand. A deliberate piece of a puzzle he hadn't asked to solve. A puzzle that suddenly felt dangerously personal. The coffee tasted like ash this morning. Monk barely registered it. He hadn't slept. The orange plastic fragment weighed on him. A silent accusation. He spent the night cataloging the details of the first death, replaying the scene in his mind, looking for something he missed. He found nothing conclusive, only a nagging sense of wrongness that wouldn't dissipate. He considered going to Raylan, presenting the brake fragment. But the sheriff's dismissive attitude had left a bitter taste. Raylan wouldn't see it as evidence. He'd see it as the ramblings of a man haunted by the past. Then the radio crackled again. The same clipped tone, the same thinly veiled urgency. Another incident, Falcon Run, possible fatality. Monk felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Not again this time. It was Old Man Hemlock. Jedediah Hemlock, a local legend, a ski instructor who'd practically grown up on Shale Ridge. A man known for two things, his encyclopedic knowledge of the mountain and his unwavering caution. Jedediah didn't take risks. He taught people about risks. The scene was eerily similar to the first. A body sprawled in the snow, expensive gear, a stand of trees. But there were differences. This time the snow wasn't quite so pristine. A few more scuff marks, a couple of panic tracks leading up to the point of impact. But still, something felt off. He just lost it. Ben stammered, his face pale. I was up on the lift line, saw him go down. Happened so fast. Monk knelt beside Jedediah, ignoring Ben's attempt at explanation. This was no random fall. Jedediah's skis were askew. But again, the bindings were released with an unnatural precision. A quick inspection revealed a small, almost imperceptible scratch on the safety lever of the right binding, as if someone had deliberately manipulated it. He scanned the area, his eyes searching fewer witnesses this time, which was strange. Falcon was usually busy. Even on weekdays, Ben claimed to be the only one who'd seen the fall, but his description felt incomplete. Anyone else see anything? Monk asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Ben hesitated. There was a snowboarder further down the run, but he was facing the other way. Said he didn't notice anything until he heard the shout, a snowboarder, convenient. Monk filed the information away. He spent the next few hours quietly asking questions to lift operators, to other ski patrol members, to the few skiers who'd been on Falcon that morning. He met with a wall of polite indifference, veiled annoyance, and outright hostility. People didn't want to talk. They didn't want to dwell on tragedy. Or perhaps, he thought grimly, they were afraid to. Just accidents, Mr. Harding, one lift operator said. Avoiding his gaze, bad luck, that is all. Mr. Harding, I don't know what you are implying, but around here we don't appreciate rumors. A ski rental shop employee snapped. The resistance only fueled his suspicion. He felt like he was wading through molasses, every step met with resistance. He needed someone who would listen, someone who understood the mountain, understood the nuances of a ski accident. He needed Lena Hansen, his former partner on ski patrol. They worked together for 5 years, a well-oiled machine, anticipating each other's movements, relying on each other's instincts. They'd been more than partners for a while, until Lena decided she needed someone less broken. She moved to Vermont, opened a small ski tuning shop, and built a life free of the ghost that haunted Shale Ridge. He found her number after a frantic search through old contact lists. Hesitantly, he dialed. Hello? Her voice was the same, warm and familiar, but with a cautious undertone. Lena, it is Monk, David Harding. A pause. Monk, wow, I haven't heard from you in a while. I need to talk to you. It is about Shale Ridge. What is going on? She sounded wary, he explained, briefly recounting the 2 deaths, the inconsistencies he'd observed, the strange feeling that something was right. Lena listened in silence, offering only occasional murmurs of acknowledgement. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. It sounds unsettling, Monk, truly. I've been following the news about the accidents. It has given me a bad feeling, weird vibes. You feel it too? I don't know what do I feel? Just unease. Shale Ridge has always been a safe mountain. Accidents happen, of course. But these feel different. Too clean, too precise. I found something at the first scene, a piece of a ski brake, a really specialized one. What kind? Austrian made. It is a rare component. That odd, those aren't cheap or common. Look, Monk, be careful. You are poking around in things you used to avoid, I know. But I can just ignore it, Lena. I understand. Just promise me I'll be careful. I promise. He ended the call, feeling a small measure of relief. At least he wasn't alone. He spent the afternoon immersed in research. He traced the ski brake component back to a small family-owned shop in Stowe, Vermont. Precision Peaks, ski tuning and fabrication. The shop catered to a niche market. Competitive skiers and extreme sports enthusiasts willing to pay a premium for the highest quality equipment. He found the shop's website. It featured a gallery of meticulously crafted ski components, glowing testimonials, and a picture of the owner, a grizzled man with piercing blue eyes named Eric Vogel. Monk dug deeper, searching for any connection between Eric Vogel and Shale Ridge, or anyone associated with the resort. He found nothing, but he did find something else. A forum post buried deep in a skiing enthusiast's website mentioned that Vogel had briefly worked as a consultant for a security firm specializing in mountain resorts. Several years ago, the firm's name, Alpine Security Solutions. Monk's blood ran cold. Alpine Security Solutions had been hired by Shale Ridge to assess its safety protocols after the avalanche that claimed Lena's life. He remembered the consultants, slick and efficient, poking around the mountain, offering recommendations for improved safety measures. Were those recommendations meant to prevent accidents or to sanitize them? He stared at the screen, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to shift into a disturbing configuration. It was a long shot, a wild, improbable theory. But it was the only thing that made sense. He glanced at his phone. 7:18 p.m. He opened his messaging app, intending to send Lena an update on his research. The screen lit up with a new message. It wasn't from Lena. It was from an unknown number. The message read, "Freed, let it go. Monk. Some things are better left buried." The drive to Stowe felt like a descent into a different world. The rugged peaks of Montana gave way to the rolling, snow-dusted hills of Vermont. The air felt heavier, colder, laced with the scent of pine and wood smoke. He'd told his manager at Shale Ridge he needed to attend a maintenance seminar. A flimsy excuse, but one that bought him a few days. He hadn't bothered asking for permission. He'd simply taken the time. Precision Peak ski tuning fabrication was tucked away on a quiet side street in Stowe. A small, unassuming building that belied the precision engineering that took place within. The scent of epoxy and metal shavings hung in the air as he walked through the door. The shop was immaculate. Tools hung on pegboards in perfect order. Skis gleamed on racks, undergoing meticulous repairs. Behind the counter stood Eric Vogel, the man from the website. He was older than Monk had anticipated, his face weathered and lined, his blue eyes sharp and assessing. "Can I help you?" Vogel asked, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. Monk had prepared a cover story. "I'm a ski technician," he said, offering a practiced smile. "Looking for a supply run. Heard you guys do some of the best work around." Vogel raised an eyebrow. "You've got a good nose for quality. What are you looking for?" "Just browsing for now, but I'm particularly interested in your high-end brakes. I've been hearing good things about the X-Force model." Vogel's eyes narrowed slightly. "The X-Force, not a bad choice. Expensive, but worth it if you're serious about performance." He paused, studying Monk. "Something specific you need?" "Just researching options for my shop. Always trying to stay ahead of the curve." Vogel seemed to accept the explanation. He launched into a detailed description of the X-Force brake, explaining its unique construction, its superior stopping power, its limited availability. Monk listened attentively, asking informed questions, carefully steering the conversation towards his real objective. "I was wondering," he said casually, "have you sold many of these X-Force brakes recently, specifically to resorts?" Vogel's expression became guarded. "I sell to individuals mostly. Occasionally, a small shop might order a few. We did have a bulk order a few months back." "Oh?" Monk's pulse quickened. "Who was that to?" "Shale Ridge, maintenance department. A fellow named Bennett. Robert Bennett seemed like a nice enough guy. A little pushy, though. Very insistent on getting the X-Force model. Wouldn't settle for anything else." Robert Bennett. The name didn't ring a bell. He mentally cataloged it. The fact that Bennett had been so insistent on the X-Force model was significant. It wasn't just about performance, Monk suspected. It was about control. "Did he mention what they were using them for?" Monk asked. Vogel shook his head. "Just said it was a safety upgrade. He wanted a large quantity, all at once. I thought it was odd, but he was paying cash, so I didn't question it." Cash, another red flag. Monk spent another hour in the shop, subtly probing for more information. Vogel, though initially cautious, seemed willing to talk to another ski tech. He learned that Bennett had paid significantly over market value for the brakes and had refused a receipt. He'd also requested that the shipment be discreet, delivered to a remote location on the Shale Ridge property. The pieces were falling into place, forming a disturbing picture. Someone at Shale Ridge had deliberately acquired a quantity of specialized ski brakes, paid cash to avoid scrutiny, and then concealed the transaction. A wave of nausea washed over him. He remembered the feeling of helplessness, the crushing weight of responsibility. The icy grip of fear, Lena, the blizzard, the avalanche. He'd held her for as long as he could, shielding her from the fury of the snow. But it hadn't been enough. He'd promised her father he'd keep her safe, a promise he'd broken. The memory was a jagged shard of glass in his chest. He'd been a young, overconfident patrolman then, believing he could control the mountain. He'd learned the brutal truth. The mountain didn't care about control. It cared about chaos. He'd blamed himself for years. He'd replayed the scenario countless times in his head, searching for a different outcome. An impossible task. The mountain had taken Lena, and it had taken a piece of him with her. He shook off the memory, forcing himself back to the present. He needed to focus. He needed to find out who Robert Bennett was and why he'd wanted those ski breaks. He thanked Vogel for his time, promising to keep in touch. As he walked back to his rental car, his mind raced. He had a growing sense of dread, a premonition that he was getting closer to something dangerous. His phone buzzed, a text message from Lena Fun. Just heard from Ben, another incident on Falcon, minor injury, a broken leg. But something feels wrong, everyone's on edge. Keep digging, Monk, I have a bad feeling. A broken leg, not another fatality, but still, another incident. And Lena's unease confirmed his suspicions. Something was happening at Shale Ridge, something sinister. He started the car, his hands trembling slightly. He needed to get back to Montana. He needed to find out who Robert Bennett was and what he was hiding. He arrived back at Shale Ridge late in the evening. The resort eerily quiet. The snow had stopped falling, and the moon cast long skeletal shadows across the slopes. He parked his car in the employee lot and headed towards the main lodge, intending to check in with security. But as he approached the entrance, he saw them, Lena, standing outside, talking to two men in dark suits. Men who didn't look like locals, men who didn't look like they belonged at Shale Ridge. Their faces were impassive, their expressions unreadable. They were close to Lena, crowding her, speaking in low, urgent tones. Lena looked uncomfortable, her body language radiating apprehension. Monk's blood turned to ice. He stopped, hidden behind a snowdrift, watching and waiting. He couldn't hear their conversation, but he could see the tension in Lena's shoulders, the tight set of her jaw. The men were questioning her, pressing her. He could feel it. He started forward, intending to intervene. But something stopped him. A gut feeling, a sense that he wasn't ready, that he didn't have enough information. He needed to be careful. He needed to understand what was happening before he exposed himself. As he watched, one of the men reached into his jacket. Monk tensed, bracing himself for the worst. But the man didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a badge, a federal badge. Monk felt a surge of adrenaline. Federal agents. What were they doing here? What did they want with Lena? He was about to step forward to confront them when his phone buzzed again. Another text message from an unknown number. The message was short, chillingly precise. Finn, let it go. Monk, some things are better left buried. The air tasted like betrayal. Monk hadn't slept. The image of Lena cornered by the federal agents burned behind his eyelids. He hadn't dared approach, paralyzed by a fear he hadn't felt since the avalanche. He'd watched until the agents and Lena disappeared into the lodge, then circled the building searching for any sign of them. Nothing. They were gone. He needed to know what they wanted with her, and he needed to understand the connection between the deaths, the ski breaks, and whatever the federal agents were investigating. He started with the money. Every conspiracy, every cover-up ultimately led back to financial incentives. He began digging through publicly available records, poring over property deeds, tax filings, and news articles. What he found wasn't encouraging. Shale Ridge was hemorrhaging money. The resort had been operating at a loss for the past 5 years, crippled by declining tourist numbers and a series of costly lawsuits. It was heavily in debt to Sterling Investments, a shadowy private equity firm with a reputation for predatory lending practices. Foreclosure was looming. The timing of the accidents was convenient. Each death triggered a significant life insurance payout. Payouts that, while tragic for the families, could temporarily alleviate the resort's financial crisis. It was a grim calculus. Human lives as collateral against corporate debt. He needed proof. Something concrete. He'd started subtly questioning resort employees, carefully steering the conversation towards the management structure and the company's financial health. Their responses were guarded, laced with anxiety. People were afraid to talk, afraid of losing their jobs. What he did gather was a consistent pattern of pressure on the ski patrol to downplay risks and avoid negative publicity. Instructors were allegedly encouraged to minimize the difficulty of certain runs, and reports of near misses were often lost or misfiled. It was always about the image. One veteran patrolman, a quiet man named Gary, told him in hushed tones, "Keep the tourists happy. Don't scare them away." That was the mantra. The man responsible for maintaining that image was Victor Caldwell, the owner of Shale Ridge. Caldwell was a self-made man, a ruthless businessman with a reputation for cutting corners and maximizing profits. He'd inherited the resort from his father, a local legend who'd built Shale Ridge on a foundation of family values and community spirit. Caldwell had systematically dismantled that foundation, transforming the resort into a profit-driven machine. Monk found several articles detailing Caldwell's aggressive business tactics, his involvement in several environmental controversies, and a pattern of exploiting loopholes in safety regulations. He was a shark, and he wasn't afraid to play dirty. He needed to talk to Lena. He found her at the ski patrol office, looking exhausted and shaken. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she kept glancing nervously towards the door. "They wouldn't tell me anything," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Just asked a lot of questions about the recent accidents, about you. They said they were investigating potential negligence." "Negligence?" Monk scoffed. "They're covering something up, Lena. I'm sure of it." He shared his findings with her, the resort's financial troubles, the insurance payouts, the pressure on the ski patrol. Lena listened intently, her initial skepticism giving way to a grim understanding. "It makes sense," she said. "Caldwell has been desperate. He has been talking about selling the resort for months, but no one wants to buy it with all the liabilities. He is willing to let people die to save his investment." Lena shook her head. "I don't know, but he is definitely willing to bend the rules, to look the other way. He has always been more concerned with the bottom line than with safety." They spent the next few hours poring over documents, sharing information. Building a case, Lena's knowledge of the resort's internal workings proved invaluable. She knew where to find records, who to talk to, and what questions to ask. "There is something about Robert Bennett," she said, her brow furrowed. "He is Caldwell's head of maintenance, a real yes-man. He handles all the equipment purchases." "The guy who bought the ski brakes," Monk said. "That is him." "I need to get into Caldwell's office, see what he is hiding." Lena hesitated. "That is risky, Monk. Caldwell keeps that place locked down tighter than Fort Knox. I have to try." They devised a plan. Lena would create a diversion, a fabricated maintenance issue that required Caldwell's attention on the other side of the resort. Meanwhile, Monk would use his knowledge of the building's layout to slip into Caldwell's office and search for incriminating evidence. The plan worked surprisingly smoothly. Caldwell, distracted by the fabricated emergency, left his office unattended. Monk slipped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. The office was opulent, a stark contrast to the rustic charm of the rest of the resort. Leather furniture, mahogany paneling, and a panoramic view of the mountains. Caldwell clearly enjoyed the trappings of success. He started with the computer. Caldwell was notoriously paranoid about security, but Lena had provided him with a backdoor password, a relic from a previous upgrade. He logged in, his fingers trembling. He began searching for financial records, emails, anything that might link Caldwell to the accidents. He found a labyrinth of encrypted files, hidden folders, and deliberately misleading transactions. It was a digital minefield. Then he found it. A hidden folder labeled Project Rebrand. Inside, a detailed plan to restructure Shale Ridge after the insurance payouts. A plan to renovate the lodge, upgrade the lifts, and attract a wealthier clientele. A plan to erase the resort's negative image and begin anew. But it was the attached spreadsheet that made his blood run cold. A list of names, skiers, all of whom had been involved in recent incidents on the mountain. Alongside each name was a single word: fire resolved. The implications were terrifying. These weren't accidents. They were eliminations. Carefully orchestrated events designed to generate insurance money and pave the way for Caldwell's grand scheme. He copied the file onto a flash drive, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. He had the proof he needed, but as he turned to leave, he heard a voice behind him. "Looking for something, Mr. Harding," standing in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. "Looking for something, Mr. Harding." Caldwell's voice was smooth, dangerously calm. He hadn't bothered with surprise. It was clear he'd been expecting Monk. "Just admiring your rebranding strategy," Monk said, holding up the flash drive. "Project Rebrand. Very creative, especially the resolved column." Caldwell's jaw tightened. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need to. He simply nodded, and two figures emerged from the shadows from the burly men in black ski gear, their faces expressionless, Caldwell's personal security. "Get him," Caldwell ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. Monk didn't hesitate. He'd known this was coming. He'd spent years navigating treacherous terrain, anticipating avalanches, assessing risks. He wasn't going to be taken down easily. He swung his fist, connecting with the jaw of the closest security guard. The man stumbled backward, momentarily stunned. Monk used the momentum to spin, knocking the second guard off balance. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wouldn't lose one. He bolted for the door, ignoring Caldwell's furious shouts. He knew the resort like the back of his hand. He knew the hidden passages, the maintenance tunnels, the shortcuts that could shave precious seconds off his escape. The chase was on. He burst out of the office and into the bustling lodge, weaving through startled skiers and snowboarders. The security guards were close behind, their heavy boots thudding against the polished floors. He reached the ski valet, grabbed his parka, and clipped into his skis. He shot out the door, accelerating down the beginner slope, the guards hot on his heels. He needed to lose them, and he needed to get to Lena. He veered off the groomed run. Plunging into the powder-filled trees, he navigated the tight turns with practiced ease, using his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage. He ducked under branches, hopped over fallen logs, and carved aggressive turns, spraying snow in the faces of his pursuers. They were persistent, relentless, but they weren't skiers. They were security guards accustomed to concrete floors and controlled environments. They struggled to keep up, their movements clumsy and uncoordinated. He reached the base of the Silver Queen chairlift, glancing around for Lena. She wasn't there. Panic clawed at his throat. Then he saw them. Caldwell, standing near the lift line, holding Lena at gunpoint. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Stop right there, Harding," Caldwell shouted, his voice echoing across the mountain. "One more step, and she gets it." Monk froze, his skis digging into the snow. He was trapped. "What do you want, Caldwell? I want you to walk away, to forget everything you've seen, to disappear. And if I don't," Caldwell's eyes glinted with cold malice, "then your little friend here will suffer the consequences." Monk's mind raced. He was outmatched, outgunned. He needed a plan. He needed time. "Let her go, Caldwell. This doesn't have to end this way." "Oh, but it does, Harding, it absolutely does." Just then, the sky began to darken. Fat snowflakes started to fall, swirling around them like ghostly dancers. A blizzard was rolling in. Visibility dropped rapidly. The wind howled, whipping snow into a frenzy. The temperature plummeted. "Looks like nature is on my side," Caldwell said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Now, are you going to cooperate, or are we going to watch your friend freeze to death?" Monk knew he couldn't reason with a man like Caldwell. He had to play for time. He had to find a way to turn the tables. "What about Bennett?" he asked, deliberately changing the subject. "He is involved in this, isn't he? He is the one who ordered the ski breaks." Caldwell's expression flickered, betraying a moment of surprise. "Bennett, he is just a maintenance man. He does what I tell him. He is more than that. He is your accomplice. And he is getting a cut of the insurance money, isn't he?" Caldwell didn't answer. He simply tightened his grip on the gun. "Stay back, Harding." Then, a voice cut through the howling wind, a voice Monk hadn't heard in years. "Drop the gun, Caldwell." It was Ben, the young ski patrolman. He was accompanied by a grizzled figure Monk recognized instantly, thirty old man Hemlock's son, Dale. Both were armed, moving with the purposeful efficiency of seasoned professionals. "You betrayed us," Peterson, Ben said, his voice cold and accusing. Peterson, that was Caldwell's head of ski patrol's last name. Monk hadn't put it together before. "I was promised a percentage," Caldwell roared, desperation creeping into his voice. "We were going to be rich. You were going to be arrested, Dale Hemlock replied. His voice steely. A chaotic skirmish erupted. Ben and Dale moved with practiced coordination, engaging Caldwell's security guards. Monk saw his opportunity. He pushed off on his skis, weaving through the chaos, heading towards Caldwell and Lena. But Caldwell was quicker than he anticipated. He shoved Lena behind him, using her as a shield. One more step, Harding, and I shoot, ignoring the threat. Monk skied towards a narrow ridge, a treacherous outcropping of rock that overlooked a steep drop-off. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance he had. He reached the ridge, skiing along its precarious edge. The wind buffeted him relentlessly, threatening to knock him off balance. He glanced back. Caldwell, driven by desperation, was following him, Lena stumbling along beside him. They were nearing the summit. The blizzard was intensifying, reducing visibility to near zero. The mountain was alive with fury. He knew he couldn't go any further. The ridge was too narrow, too exposed. He needed to make a stand. He stopped, digging his skis into the snow, bracing himself against the wind. Caldwell and Lena caught up, their faces contorted with fear and exhaustion. "It is over, Harding," Caldwell said, his voice raspy. He raised the gun, aiming it directly at Monk's chest. "It is all over." And then, as the blizzard swirled around them, trapping them in a vortex of snow and desperation, Monk found himself staring down the barrel of a gun, facing a man who was willing to kill to protect his secrets. The wind screamed like a banshee, tearing at his exposed skin. Snow stung his eyes, blurring the already indistinct landscape. Caldwell's gun was a cold black weight against the swirling white. Lena stood trembling beside him, her face a mask of terror. "Any last words, Harding?" Caldwell's voice was strained, laced with desperation. Monk didn't bother responding. He'd been studying this ridge for years, memorizing its contours, understanding its vulnerabilities. He knew exactly what he needed to do. "You always underestimate the mountain," he said. His voice surprisingly calm despite the raging storm. It wasn't a boast. It was a statement of fact. He shifted his weight, angling his skis towards a specific point. A narrow band of unstable snow near the ridge's edge. He'd noticed it earlier, a telltale sign of a weak layer beneath the surface. Years on ski patrol had taught him to read the snow like a book. He stomped down with all his weight, a deliberate, calculated movement. A rumble echoed through the mountain, a low, guttural growl that quickly escalated into a deafening roar. The avalanche. It wasn't a massive slide, not this time. A controlled release, precisely targeted. The wall of snow broke loose, cascading down the slope, obliterating the path Caldwell had intended to use for his escape. It wasn't designed to bury him, just to cut him off. Caldwell, caught off guard, stumbled backward, losing his footing. The gun slipped from his grasp, tumbling into the swirling snow. Lena cried out, instinctively shielding her face. Monk lunged forward, grabbing Lena's arm, pulling her away from the surging snow. He dug his skis into the ice, anchoring himself against the force of the avalanche. When the snow settled, a thick blanket of white covered the slope. Caldwell was no longer visible. "Caldwell," Monk shouted, his voice hoarse. "Are you all right?" A muffled curse drifted up from the snow. Caldwell was alive, but trapped. Within minutes, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Sheriff Raylan, accompanied by a team of deputies, arrived on the scene, their faces grim with determination. Raylan stared at the aftermath of the avalanche, then at Monk and Lena, his expression shifting from surprise to grudging respect. He'd been a skeptic, but the evidence spoke for itself. "You son of a," Raylan muttered, then shook his head. "Looks like you were right all along, Harding." He turned to his deputies. "Secure Caldwell. And get Lena warmed up." Caldwell was hauled from the snow, sputtering and furious. He didn't resist arrest. He knew he'd been beaten. "I want my lawyer," he screamed. His voice lost in the wind. Raylan ignored him. He turned to Monk. "Where's the evidence?" Monk led them to Caldwell's office, where he'd left the flash drive containing the Project Rebrand file. Raylan examined the documents, his face growing darker with each passing revelation. "This is incredible," he said, shaking his head. He was planning to profit off these deaths, to rebuild the resort on the backs of those families. "And Peterson was helping him," Lena added, her voice trembling with emotion. "He was complicit in everything." Peterson, the head of ski patrol, was arrested shortly thereafter, under interrogation. He confessed to manipulating the safety reports, pressuring instructors to downplay risks, and even tampering with ski equipment. The truth about the death soon, about the deliberate manipulation, the greed, and the callous disregard for human life food was quickly revealed to the public. The news sent shockwaves through the community. Shale Ridge was thrust into the national spotlight, the resort's reputation irrevocably tarnished. The insurance companies launched their own investigations, refusing to pay out the claims. Lawsuits were filed. Careers were ruined. Shale Ridge, the once proud mountain resort, was facing an uncertain future. Lena, wrapped in a blanket and sipping hot chocolate in the lodge, looked at Monk with tear-filled eyes. "You did it, Monk," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You stopped him." "We did it," he corrected, squeezing her hand. "Together." A sliver of the weight that had burdened him for years began to lift. He hadn't been able to save Lena all those years ago, but he'd been able to help bring justice to others. The aftermath was messy. Closure wouldn't be quick or easy, but the truth was out. And for the first time in a long time, Monk felt a sense of peace. He was preparing to leave the lodge to start the process of rebuilding his own life. When his phone rang, an unknown number, he hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A voice, distorted and low, crackled through the speaker. "You think you've won. Harding, you think you've uncovered everything." Monk's blood ran cold. He recognized the distortion. A voice scrambler. "Who is this?" he demanded. "Let's just say I was involved, but I wasn't one of Caldwell's pawns. I saw what was happening, and I got out." "What do you want?" "Caldwell wasn't the mastermind, Harding. He was just a puppet. There are others, people higher up, people with a lot more to lose." "What are you talking about?" "Shale Ridge wasn't an isolated incident. This is part of something bigger, a pattern, other resorts, other deaths. Who is behind it?" The voice chuckled, a chilling, disembodied sound. "You've only scratched the surface. Harding, the snow runs deep." Then the line went dead. Monk stared at his phone, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd thought he'd reached the summit, but he was beginning to suspect that he had merely reached a base camp. The real climb had just begun. The silence was deafening. Shale Ridge wasn't silent often. It was a place built on laughter, the swish of skis, the cheerful chatter of tourists. But now, the lift stood still, the slopes deserted, the lodge eerily empty. The resort was in a state of suspended animation, awaiting its fate. The investigation was thorough, relentless. Federal agents swarmed the mountain, poring over financial records, interviewing employees, and meticulously reconstructing the events that had led to the deaths. The news coverage was relentless, painting a damning portrait of greed, corruption, and callous disregard for human life. The community of Bitterroot Falls was reeling. Shale Ridge wasn't just a ski resort. It was the lifeblood of the town. It provided jobs, attracted tourists, and supported local businesses. Its potential closure threatened to devastate the entire region. Monk found himself thrust into the spotlight, an unwilling witness forced to relive his darkest memories. He testified in court, calmly and meticulously recounting his observations, presenting the evidence he'd gathered and detailing his suspicions. He spoke about the inconsistencies, the manipulated equipment, the unnerving sense of premeditation. It wasn't easy. Facing Caldwell, even in handcuffs, was like staring into the abyss. But he held his ground, driven by a sense of responsibility to the victims and their families. He owed them that much. Lena was by his side, a quiet pillar of strength. She accompanied him to court, offered words of encouragement, and simply held his hand when the memories became too overwhelming. "You're doing this for them, Monk," she'd said, her voice soft but firm. "Don't let him break you." Her support was a lifeline. He hadn't allowed himself to truly process the trauma of his past, burying it beneath layers of routine and avoidance. But Lena refused to let him hide. She encouraged him to talk, to confront his demons, to grieve for Lena Thoen, the little girl he hadn't been able to save. It was a painful process filled with tears, anger, and regret. But slowly, tentatively, he began to heal. He started seeing a therapist, a compassionate woman who helped him unpack the weight of his guilt and find a path towards acceptance. The verdict came quickly. Caldwell was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, manslaughter, and conspiracy. Peterson, his accomplice, received a similar sentence. The justice system had spoken, but Justice, Monk knew, couldn't bring back the lives that had been lost. A week later, a memorial service was held at the base of Falcon Run. A simple ceremony, attended by the families of the victims, resort employees, and members of the community. A stone cairn was erected, bearing the names of those who had died. Monk and Lena stood shoulder to shoulder, their hands intertwined, as a local minister read a poem about loss and remembrance. The wind howled, whipping snow around them, as if the mountain itself was mourning. He felt a surge of emotion-feeding grief, sadness, but also a glimmer of hope. The community had been scarred, but it wasn't broken. They would rebuild, they would heal. The future of Shale Ridge remained uncertain. Sterling Investments was considering selling the resort to a new owner, someone who might be willing to invest in its revitalization. But even if the resort never reopened, the spirit of the mountain would endure. He realized he couldn't stay away. He needed to be a part of the healing process. He needed to use his skills to help prevent similar tragedies. He volunteered with the Bitterroot County Search and Rescue Team, offering his expertise in mountain navigation, avalanche safety, and search techniques. It wasn't the same as being on ski patrol, but it was close. He was still helping people, still using his abilities to protect others. But this time, he wasn't beholden to corporate profits or political pressures. He was free to focus on what truly mattered, saving lives. He found a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't a complete restoration, but it was a start. Months passed, winter gave way to spring. The snow melted, revealing the green slopes of Shale Ridge. The resort remained closed, a ghostly reminder of the events that had transpired. He and Lena had begun to build a life together, a quiet existence punctuated by long hikes, shared meals, and the simple comfort of companionship. The weight of his past hadn't vanished completely, but it no longer controlled him. One afternoon, he found himself back on the slopes of Shale Ridge, walking along the abandoned trails. He was checking on the condition of the emergency shelters, preparing for the next winter season. He paused, looking out over the valley, the sun warming his face. The view was breathtaking, as it always had been. But something felt off. He had the unsettling sensation of being watched. He scanned the tree line, his instincts on high alert, and then he saw it. A figure standing amongst the pines, partially obscured by the shadows. A figure he recognized, someone he hadn't seen in years. A motor. Yet unnamed, the figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there silently observing him. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The peace he had begun to find felt fragile, threatened. He knew with a chilling certainty that the ghosts of Shale Ridge weren't finished with him yet.